Another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. All right, fun. Um, all right. Some physics here. I guess I'll do some physics to start with, and then we'll talk some more physics in contextual, big picture kind of way, maybe. So I was thinking about the whole elastic and inelastic and trying to come up with a good definition, and it's still insufficient because I thought of another element that messes the whole thing up. So I basically said, okay, if a collision doesn't create much heat, sound, or permanent deformation, that is, deformation does not spring back, it is called elastic. Now, deformation that doesn't spring back is kind of complicated because obviously if it doesn't spring back but it stops, if the deformation stops, like you're moving some bits inside of something and it stops, it stopped because of friction with some other piece of the environment. So the energy didn't really cease to exist, it just went somewhere else even smaller, even less visible. Which is the whole trick of it. So I guess that's probably an important. I've drawn it so many times that the momentum theory gives you a simple way of understanding how energy moves from one object to another object. That it's a volume, mass times velocity. Mass times velocity. And the volume is your little energy. And they're made out of quanta, bits, beans, ball bearings, whatever you want to call them. A thing moving a fixed speed and a fixed mass. So that there's a certain volume of speed and mass inside of the volume of your mass and your speed. And all you can do is distribute those. And if you're attempting to transfer the balls, the energy from one thing to another, the idea is don't spill them. Don't have them go in other directions, doing other things in the universe besides going into the other object and making it move. And that's all this elastic and inelastic has to do with. So anyway, continuing. If a large percentage of the energy is used to create environmental changes, so if you're changing the environment and the environment isn't going to give it back, realistically, it's going to keep going through the environment. It's not coming back. It's leaving as photons. It's going away as sound. It's going away, and it's not coming back to go back into the thing you're interacting with. So if you don't create environmental changes, the collision is called elastic. Now, there are plenty of physicists, maybe half of them, I don't know, who kind of point out that every interaction is inelastic because there's no such thing as a perfectly elastic collision. There's no mechanism that allows you to perfectly exchange everything without creating any kind of sparks or any kind of sound or any kind of change into the environment. It's really hard to do. Now, if you're in space, it's a little easier because certainly you don't have the atmosphere getting in the way and all these other things, but it's still theoretically dicey to ever say anything is perfectly elastic. Okay, so efficient transfers are elastic, inefficient transfers are inelastic. So if we take something like the physics girl example, the trains, she's in one sense claiming it's perfectly elastic in the sense that I'm perfectly transferring the momentum, right? So you can't completely transfer your momentum, and that's all your little bits. That's your whole volume went into the other object, and lose half of it to the environment. If I lost half the energy to the environment, then it would be a very inelastic interaction, right? So this is just one of the logical proofs I would present to you as an explanation of why their physics is nonsense, because they can't even use a sensible definition of what elastic is. It really doesn't have anything to do with sticky or hard or any of that stuff. A spring is elastic because it deforms, but it gives back its deformation. So the energy is conserved in the important directions. And everything's a pendulum inside. So you can see when you're exchanging energy, you're pushing it into something. Now, if the other thing doesn't actually move, it's like a pendulum. The energy is still moving inside of it, and it's going to come back. So I've sort of made the point that if you hit something and it doesn't move, it does still mean the electrons moved. The electrons all went this way. They couldn't get the nucleuses to come with them, so they have to come back again, and they reflect. So in cases where you hit something like a brick wall, brick isn't a very good example, but a steel girder, something immovable, what's really happening is the energy goes in, it goes to the other side, vibration, reflects back because the electrons can't get the atoms to all move, because all the atoms won't go with them. The electrons have to come back. So it goes back, and the whole thing just vibrates like ultrasound. It's vibrating. And if the other object isn't still connected to it, it can't push it. And all it can really do is bounce it, on the surface. And so the first bounce, though, might be a very strong bounce. And so it might bounce back. But it's not going to bounce back with all the energy, because the vibration is everywhere in the steel. The steel didn't know, send the vibration to one point. Now the steel is sending the vibration to all kinds of places. So you don't get back what you put in. And what's left is a piece of vibrating metal that's got to wait to dissipate the energy into the environment. Anyway, that would be that's not a proven fact, but I'm just saying that's a reasonable, in my opinion, a reasonable explanation of the differences. So we'll go to comments. So, very nice. Aerosoap Breeze. Sorry for the delayed response. Likewise, in the sense that I haven't provided, I'll make a video specifically on just this subject of kinds of experiments. Because what this whole thing with the Brozo the clown or whatever, Breezy, what the hell's his name? Bruffy. Yeah, Bruffy the Wonder Clown. What's been revealed, in this process is these experiments do require engineering. And, I would argue that what physics has done for hundreds of years is engineer them to prove their points and avoid any, that one's a weird one, that one doesn't look right, let's not do that experiment again. So they have presented the evidence, like a Ken Wheeler, in a manner that deceives. Ken Wheeler doesn't tell you everything he knows about ferrocells. See, he's taking them apart. He's probably done them with one single ray of light. He's done them all kinds of ways. He's looked under the microscope. He's seen it all, done it all, and he just doesn't tell people what he has observed and learned, because it's not to his purpose. It doesn't defend his theory. All right, so experiments, that's why we don't have a plethora of experiments. We have the same physicist, we have different physicists doing the same exact experiment, right? I've sort of shown that I've shown some of the 1950s clips from MIT, and they're exactly the same experiment that Professor Lewin did in 2000, that he was acclaimed for. Oh, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. He just copied exactly what they were doing in 1950, what they filmed in 1950. Same exact experiments. Not even any nuance. Anyway, so clearly these experiments have been practiced to produce a result. And that's the part you have to really avoid, is thinking, oh yeah, I covered everything. I figured out all the details. No, you didn't figure them out. So I hadn't been put on the spot before. The idea is that, this is why I was apprehensive about doing any of these experiments myself, is because clearly I don't have the hardware. And second, doing it on the cheap is difficult because it's hard to get the precision you need to eliminate all the sources of friction or angular rotation, or it's a little bit crooked, or blah blah blah, all the things that can screw it up. All right, anyway, I'm confident that the camera I have will be sufficient. Well, okay, it's nice to be confident. like I said, the more I thought about the strobe thing, the more I thought, yeah, this is probably the way to go. But I thought lots of things, so I'll get to that in a separate video where I'll detail all the things I have thought of. But ways of capturing the energy. Now this brings me back to the Joule experiment, and for which Joule is named after. Now he didn't use mathematics and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't all big on all that kind of crap. He was a brewer, and what he did was try to find some way to define efficiency. So his real motivation, wasn't purely scientific. It was they had just started creating electric motors, and he wanted to find out if it would cost him more to replace his equipment from the steam engine to the electric engine, and whether one of them was more efficient in how it provided mechanical energy. And so he figured out this device. So he's a brewer, so he thought of a tank of water, and you put a spinner in it, and then you put weights on it and see which one creates more heat in the water. So it's a way of creating a completely inelastic mechanism. So in the sense, he's trying to convert the mechanical energy, the movement, into as much agitation, environmental. He's trying to get all the mechanical energy to be converted into environmental energy, so he can, measure what its absolute energy is. So if he can make a completely inelastic collision as completely as possible, then he can measure the container holds the heat. He can measure what the absolute production of the machine was, or the mechanism. So this was a way of making these comparisons. And so I'm pretty sure he did it with different weights. So I'll have to I'll have to go back to the Joule thing and see if there's actually what the data actually says in those experiments. And but I'm quite confident they said basically what I'm arguing is that what he basically proved was kind of conservation of momentum. He didn't prove the existence of kinetic energy. The fact is the heavy object falling 1/4 of the distance, creates torque, pushes more water more aggressively than the lighter half-weight object falling 4 times the distance, because it's barely pushing the paddle against the water. So it takes a lot longer and it turns more, but the fact is it doesn't accomplish more because the heavy weight pushed the water a lot harder. All right. So anyway, that experiment should provide pretty good evidence, blah, 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 blah. So I'm not asking you to reproduce that. But I thought of all kinds of ways of collecting energy. Even say if you had a container of water and you had a membrane on one side, a piece of soft plastic, a plastic bag. And then you knock something into the plastic bag, then you're displacing the water, and you can have a tiny little thing to see exactly how much water is displaced, and it might be some way of measuring. So there's all kinds of the trick is finding a good way to measure, to actually see how much energy something has. Now I had a lot of confidence in springs, I have to say, but I have to wonder how much that's sort of just based on what they say, right? Because the evidence we get is incomplete. I mean, they don't do the experiments that are just almost the obvious simple ones. So we have incomplete evidence. All right, anyway. Can you please take the time to describe as precisely as possible what demonstrations you believe would prove your position regarding kinetic, momentum, energy equivalence arguments? Well, obviously we want to take the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour and the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour, and we want to just measure how much horsepower they have. How much water they can lift out of a well, how much work they can do. So how much energy they can generate. You could put a generator on the wheel, as I suggested. Lots of ways, and I would argue that it will always come out that the two trains have the same energy. One has it in a low velocity form that's durable. You can do low velocity with a lot of mass. So I mean, you can, the volume is just in a different shape. One of them has the volume in this shape. The other one has the volume in this shape, and that's it. There's no difference. There's nothing squared. There's not multiple velocities. There's just the one velocity. And so that's what we're trying to do. Now, obviously, some of the ways to get there, but what's come up as this controversy is this fact that these people are all claiming that springs don't work, that they don't store the energy efficiently, they can't produce it efficiently, that they lose half the energy. So if I compress a spring with a heavy, the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour, and then I replace it with the 5-ton train and release the spring, they're saying the spring doesn't work. It can't give back the energy. It only gives back 1.4 of the momentum. So we can destroy the momentum, which most physicists say is not possible. So they're saying something most physicists overtly say isn't possible, but okay, fine. Let them say it. And let's see if there's any demonstration of it. And it's a huge destruction. Let's understand the 0.4 in that 1.4 means you only increased the velocity by 0.4. That means 0.6. You destroyed 0.6. So where you would expect there to be a 2, you only did 0.4 extra. I mean, the one part is a given. The extra is the part. So you only got 0.4 of what you should have gotten if you got an equal amount of momentum. So it's not a little, it's not even half the energy destroyed. It's more than half the energy of the object in the sense of the difference that you should expect. It's less than half the difference you would expect. Okay, if momentum was to be conserved. All right. So, fair enough. I'm just saying, yes, I'm going to take a little time because I like I said, every time I just was thinking about the elastic and inelastic thing, I thought about bouncing. I didn't include bouncing. This bouncing is essentially the energy going from one side, bouncing off the other side, now being redirected in the opposite direction. So it's like the pendulum swinging, and now it's going the wrong way. So obviously it's evidence of the energy this way being destroyed, but it really didn't get destroyed because all it did was, electrons are very good at exchanging energies direction. You bounce into an electron, it just throws it back at you. It's very good at reflecting things like a magnet is. Energy in, energy back out again in the opposite direction. So the U-turn can happen for free. That's sort of the fact here. The U-turn happens for free. You don't pay anything for it. So energy can be thrown back at you just as easily as it can keep going forward. Mechanically, for the universe, it doesn't have a problem doing either one. Just as it can theoretically exchange the energy very efficiently, very elastically, it can also reflect the energy very elastically, very efficiently. All right. So this was some extra he added, which was great. Also, to the general community, I don't think we have one of those, I am undertaking this entirely on my own curiosity. Now, Stephen Bro started off that way and said exactly that kind of stuff to me. Right? So, I'm just saying, I'm not associating you with him at all. I'm not profiling you and saying, okay, every asshole who volunteers is going to turn into a petty, resentful piece of fucking shit who lies constantly. Okay, so I'm not saying you're that kind of lying piece of shit. But that's exactly what Stephen Bro said. I'm doing this for my own curiosity. Those were his own fucking words. And instead, he's now some resentful, petty asshole who thinks I owe him something. And I don't owe him anything. So it's good you're saying this nice and publicly. Okay, Stephen Bro said it publicly too, right when he's doing his little two-slit gooey experiments. He's pointing out how this is all something he wants to do. But the fact is, no one's going to go back 4 years and see what he said publicly. Anyway, nobody has solicited anything from me. Again, I didn't solicit Stephen Bro's participation. He volunteered to help for the purpose of science. And in no way suggested that, hey, you're involving me in something, and now you're responsible for my destiny. No, I'm not. Okay. I don't want or expect anything, nor can I promise anything to anybody. So again, I'm just saying these are exactly how Stephen Bro entered my world. Okay, with this same benign, I'm harmless, I don't want any trouble, I'm not looking to screw up or fuck up or mess up or be an asshole. And he turned into a preposterous asshole. But again, I'm in no way suggesting, I'm willing, to be burned again. But I'm just saying, you have to understand, in my 15 years on the internet, I have been burned by so many people who say, I love you, Gary. And the next day, literally the next day, they're sticking knives right into my spinal cord. From behind, of course, always from behind. Anyway, I don't want to expect anything or promise. Okay. My interest in physics is a byproduct of the unintuitive understanding I have garnered from various explanations about our current physical model. Yes, so like you, these aren't good enough answers. They look like they made it up, on a matchbook cover kind of thing. I mean, this is just so sloppy. Oh, well, we have a problem with our, gravity equations. Let's just invent fake gravity matter. I mean, it's just so bad. Ugh. Okay. Invisible man matter. I mean, really. It does everything except you can't see it. Well, it actually does nothing except make gravity, right? So it's a new kind of matter that doesn't have any material features, except it's gravitational. Oh, I mean, that's so bad. Yes, that's unintuitive. That sounds like a big, fat fucking lie. I mean, it just sounds like you just made that fucking cartoon character up, and it has nothing to do with reality. All right, anyway. I am, however, just a layman. That's not to say, well, look, everybody's just but I mean, you don't have to have a badge to have spent some time on planet Earth and watched physical things happen and wondered, about how they happened. That's not to say that it is wrong, just that it does not apparently operate how my natural reasoning expected it to. No, what you really should say is it just doesn't sound reasonable. It doesn't fit into just like the rules of logic, there shouldn't be contradictions. There's contradictions in this stuff. Quantum mechanics versus bent space, for example. They just happen to be fundamentally different ways things move, yet they move exactly the same speed by coincidence. Yeah, that's not very reasonable. They just by chance turns out that way. Completely different mechanisms. Yet they just happen to go the same speed. All right. As a little, no force in the universe is ever affected by another force. You can't make magnets, how to put it? You can't bend any of them with anything except one exception. Photons are bent by gravity. And the one exception, it's bent twice as much, which doesn't make any sense at all. The fastest thing in the universe is bent twice as much. The thing hardest to bend is bent twice as much. Anyway, expect it to. Okay, as little weights that carry, I figure, as little weight is that carries, I figure I would just clarify my personal position regards. Okay, yeah, so, and let me clarify mine. I'm really grateful for anybody who wishes to contribute with anything called evidence. So again, if they can provide a valid link to evidence, I would appreciate it. I would be willing to pay for it. If somebody can find a really good piece of evidence demonstrating the collection of kinetic energy, that I would love to see it. But anyway, yeah, so good. and like I said, I'll make a video going over the different experiments. Like, there's two things we have to first establish, right? First, we'll see what Stephen Bro has, and yeah, because he's claiming that springs only produce this 1.4 thing, and he can prove that. All right, fine. If it's a fact, then we're going to have to go to something other than springs, because obviously springs don't conserve momentum for some dopey reason. So there's hardly use something that doesn't work to measure the energy, right? Right. Okay. And I wanted to get back to the Professor Lewin thing. You know, just this weird little thing. You know, just because it is. You know, so I want to create an experimental device. So I'm really thinking about, you know, the longer the pendulum you can make, you know, from a good height, like the top of a staircase down or something. You know, gravity gets to be irrelevant in terms of motion. It won't mean much. So if you shoot something on a pendulum, you know, and you have a long enough pendulum, you know, you don't have much air resistance. You know, it's a pretty good way to do things. The longer your string gets, now the more it's going to be a problem with light objects. But if you have heavy enough objects, you know, blah, 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 blah. I'm just saying, work pretty good. So, so the Lewin experiment was, you know, you take this light thing with a spring on it, you know, and you're going to bang a light thing into a heavy thing. And what happened in his experiment was, you know, the light thing, let's say, has a, you know, a velocity of, let's make it so we can cut it into 3/4. Well, let's just make the velocity 10 and the mass 5. Okay, so 5 mass, 10 velocity. And so that's a total of 50, which isn't a great number, but who cares? So the point was, he crashes it into a heavier object, and the heavier object goes 2/3 of this number. So it goes, what, 35? So it ends up with the total number of its momentum. So its momentum is, no, it's 2/3 of the velocity, sorry. So it's 2/3 of the velocity. So it ends up 6.6, right, as its velocity. So it's twice the mass, okay, and now it has a 6.6 velocity. So obviously this is 50, right, and this is 6.6. So 2 times 6.6 is whatever, 13.2, right? Times 5, which is is 3 times 15, 65, you know, point whatever. Obviously, this is too much momentum. So this 50 momentum turned into a 65 momentum. And you can just keep doing this, right? Theoretically, you could just have this go into this bigger thing. And now you'll be up to, you know, you'll just keep increasing it by that, you know, 1/3 percentage. So, you know, this would be 92 or whatever. And, you know, you just keep taking a 50 momentum and keep increasing it. And that, you know, my intuition, my reasoning skill says that's free energy, right? I mean, there's no way around it, because I can just make this circular, you know, and make it hit more and more of these things. I can make it hit 2, so I can I go through 4 or 5 iterations. I've tripled the amount, you know, I have 3x the momentum here, and now I take my 3x and I make 3 of these little ones start again, you know, and then I make each one of them do 3, and then I make each one of them do 3, and I'm creating a lot of energy, right? So it's a, you know, I'm just saying that's an experiment I've got to see redone in some form, because the way he did it, it seemed empirical, it seemed undeniable. I mean, that's what happened. And something, I'm arguing, the only thing you can blame it on is this spring, right? A spring hitting a spring. He actually has a spring on both cars. So a spring hitting a spring somehow creates this effect. And, you know, how he rationalizes it is, he says, well, the momentum, this actually bounces back at 1/3. So this bounces back at 1/3, and this got 2/3. But the real question would be, you know, that's the conservational. It conserves kinetic energy also that way. No, it actually loses kinetic energy. So this one conserved momentum, but it lost kinetic energy in this process. Yet, you didn't really conserve the momentum because you actually have more of it going in one direction. I mean, it's undeniable. You have more momentum going in this direction, and that's all you care about is one direction. I mean, when you're collecting energy, you're not collecting it based on going back and forth. That's not helping you any. It's going in one direction. That's what helps you. I mean, that's what you're trying to do, is get it going like a bullet. You're trying to get the bullet to go one way very fast. Not this, not sitting the gun going like this. Anyway, so that's an experiment I want to do in some form, just to find out if springs actually are magical. We didn't know it all this time, but springs are actually magical. Blah 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 blah. So, yeah. But this is what I'm stating about experiments. I showed him with the ping pong ball, where he takes the billiard ball and hits it into the ping pong ball and then says this is some kind of thing that has to do with mass and velocity, when no, it has to do with the fact that the ping pong ball is a spring. There's no getting around it. It's a spring. The surface bends and then pops back out again. It's a spring. So this is what a spring does. A spring can convert a low velocity into a high velocity. Springs, that's what springs are sort of famous for, is I push the spring very slowly and then stop it. Or I push the spring really fast and stop it. I get the same thing. I did the same accomplishment. The spring compressed. And, so it doesn't care. So it can give back any speed. I can compress a spring and I can give back any speed I want. It's not any speed to the limit of the spring's capacity to release. The spring itself has a speed limit, and you can't give anything speed faster than the spring can decompress, obviously. So anyway, so that's my only context here, is that yes, we want to just do the simple experiment where we compress a spring and then we put a heavy mass on it and we shoot the spring, and then we put a half mass on it and we shoot the spring. That's supposed to be all we need to do, because all the arguments, the counter arguments, are all based on this 1.4 thing being real, and I'm arguing it's no way real, obviously, but it wouldn't matter to the kinetic energy argument. It's the irony. So again, the whole thing here is the biggest lie of this whole thing is kind of in your words, right? So let's see. Okay, so describe as precisely as possible what demonstrations you believe would prove your position regarding kinetic momentum energy. I shouldn't have to prove my position any more than they should have to prove their position. So I'm saying I can prove momentum is conserved. They can't prove anything about this kinetic energy thing. We don't have any, there's no evidence of theirs to argue. So you're asking me essentially to prove their God doesn't exist. So that's the catch of the experiment. Now, the only overt way to do that, again, overtly I can prove their God doesn't exist in the sense that their God is completely dependent on the fact that this energy they're claiming has to actually do something. So all I have to do is prove that it doesn't do anything. So the 10-ton train versus the 5-ton train will resolve it. So all we have to do is create a inverse relationship between two objects and demonstrate that the faster object doesn't have any more ability to work. So now we can take a really difficult example like the dime going 1,000 miles an hour and the 2 kilograms going 1 mile an hour. Now I'm arguing it's the same amount of work they can do in the universe. When you convert them into, if you could hit them into a spring, the spring would compress the same amount. Okay, but the problem is you can't shoot the bullet into a spring because it breaks the spring's tolerances. The spring can't catch the bullet. It just ends up shattering the spring. Okay, so that can't work. But the argument is that if we can find a mechanism to collect the inverse, two objects of inverse mass to velocity ratios, and we just find some way that's really reliable to collect the to extract the energy like the joule experiment, for example. Tie the trains to a rope, and then the rope spins a propeller in the water. Okay, and yes, the faster train, okay, will go further and spin more, but it will spin slower. The spinner will actually move slower with the fast object, because the fast object is going to be, what's the word I want to use? Fast object will, yes, it's going to die from the friction quicker than the heavy object, is going to. It'll move less distance. I shouldn't even say, I'm making gravity comparison again. That's always so dangerous. So I've messed up my own thought experiment by thinking about gravity. But anyway, I'm just saying that's all we want to do. We want to tie trains to some mechanism that actually captures the joules of energy. What is the total amount of molecular movement produced by the objects? What's their maximum amount of molecular movement they can produce? And we want to have a vessel that just doesn't allow the energy to escape, but does reveal it all, turns it all into some substance we can measure, like temperature. See, I don't know how efficiently. I mean, I can't say for sure what the whole barrel spinning thing was based on cannons and how hot they got, and hard to say that that's perfectly efficient in terms of, I'm sure the barrel loses some heat to the environment and the barrel moves because the water moves. So I don't know exactly whether temperature is collecting all the energy, obviously. But the argument would be, is it, if it's 90%, that's all you need, is some kind of reliable, way to measure. The total energy. So anyway, so that's the first experiment has to, but like I said, they are kind of related. So maybe you can do all the experiments with one kind of mechanism, is my point. And so I'm thinking, if you can make, reliable containers that you can change the weight of, and you hang them, and then you bang them into each other, that might be better than the air track. Even better than an air track. All right. So, so I'll make a video on that subject. All right. So the JPG guy, who I appreciate, just can't hurt. I'm just saying that obviously they don't have, you should be able to concede by now that they do not wish to answer the questions. They won't draw anything. They won't explain anything. Nobody will make a counter video to anything I'm saying unless they wish to mock me or quote mine me or do some other kind of nonsense. They won't deal with these exact arguments I'm making ever. Okay, we have no interaction with the opposition. Okay, so you're playing mediator with that opposition, and you should have realized by now that they have no interest in actually answering the specific paradox presented. Okay, we saw AB science just run away from the questions entirely, dismissively, insultingly. And now you're seeing what Pyrrho's doing. And now he's doing it to you specifically, too, in the sense that he's, you're just wasting my time, my precious time. I mean, he's not going to answer you. All right, well, anyway. So, look, it doesn't hurt to clarify that they won't answer the questions. I'm just saying that you keep posting this stuff. Just re-engaged Pyrrho in the comments section. So what? You didn't engage him in answering any of the questions. He's still just evading them. So it's not news. It's not going to be news until they actually make a statement that you can make sense of. And then you can convey this sensible response they made. Now, you've already given me a response from the Quora people that was absolute crap, and you didn't seem to know that it was absolute crap. I mean, a gravity equation is not every circumstance. All the things we're talking about, collisions and transfers, have nothing to do with gravity. They have nothing to do with constant forces, raining down. something's in a constant force raining on it. This isn't what, interactions are. Impulses happen in billionths of a second. They're not, they're not some kind of constant pushing force. Anyway, I'll take a break and we'll go pop over to the pyrrho nonsense. But again, it's just nonsensical invasion and pompous and arrogant and all that stuff. It's just typical pyrrho. No evidence. Just he wants to pontificate. He doesn't want to demonstrate or explain or in any way defend the crap he says. He just says crap. He's really a crappy person. Just crappy. Yuck. Alright, should be back. So, Richie chose to, obviously, Pyrrho evaded the spaceship argument, which I think is the really simpler one. The 2 kilograms going one way, the 2 grams going the other way, at 1,000 times a different speed, because it's 1,000 times a different mass. Okay. And that the spaceship would be neutral to those 2 events. One of them isn't 2,000 joules, the other one isn't 4 joules or 3 joules. That's not true. Just as the gun doesn't create thousands of joules in the bullet and only 5 joules in the stock of the gun. Those things don't happen. The same amount of energy went both ways. Anyway, and that's the actual points being argued and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so he instead chose to do his evasion on the 10-ton for a 5-ton train argument. Okay, so Pyrrho's response to what I said, I won't read what I said, but, is momentum is only conserved if the kinetic energy is not turned into other energy. So this is more of this nonsense. So we have at least 2 experiments. All right. So I've shown 2. I've shown more than that. But anyway, so we can just move a 1 mass object, and then we can drop another 1 mass on it. So 1 mass, and we just drop it onto the other object, and so now it becomes a 2 mass object, and the evidence clearly shows that it leaves with 1/2 the velocity. Okay, so, and there's absolutely 0 evidence that anything blew up or caught fire. Now this 1/2, okay, it might be 0.499999999. A tiny bit is lost. Yes, there is some sound, blah blah blah. But if you drop it, from a tiny little distance and you just let it pop onto the cart just keeps on its way and it just goes 1/2 the velocity. So that's I've demonstrated in more than 1 experiment. Now there's another Professor Lewin experiment about harmonic motion that also demonstrates it. So you have 2 carts of the same mass connected to a spring, okay, and you put a little ball in the middle just for fun, okay, because you're really following the center of gravity is the catch. All right, and the fact is you push 1 car. Okay, so you push this car, and what it's basically going to do now is it's going to do the same thing this train is going to do. It's going to add these 2 energies. Okay, so this has 1 mass and this has 1 mass, but the idea is this car is going to move, compress the spring, and then the spring is going to decompress and move this car. So this car will stop, this car will move. Then this car will stop, and then this car will move, and this car will move, and this car will stop. Well, the key thing is this thing is going to move with 1/2 the initial velocity that you push this cart with. So you push this cart with initial velocity, it's going to end up adding these 2 masses. These 2 masses will herky-jerky their way. This one will stop. Like I said, this one will recompress the spring. Then it stops because it compressed the spring. And then this one will start again because the spring will uncompress. See, and it'll just keep doing that. But this will move at a constant speed, 1/2 the original velocity. So there's no evidence of any huge losses of energy here. So we're 1/2 the energy is supposed to be lost somewhere. It's not getting lost anywhere. It's right here. 1/2 the velocity right there. So the center of mass of the system is moving away at 1/2 the initial velocity because there's 2 cars and you only moved 1. The initial velocity being the velocity of the impulse you move this car with. All right, so there's no evidence that one half the energy. So the idea, what they're saying is that half the energy of the movement of this car is destroyed when I drop the mass on it. That's what they're saying. So just think about a 10-ton, a 5-ton train. So if we make it 5-ton train, going 10 miles an hour, okay, 10 miles velocity, okay, and we convert that into a 10-ton train going 5 velocity. Now their argument is that when in the conversion process, I essentially took all the energy, okay, of a 5-ton train going 5 miles an hour, right? Because I'm losing half the energy, all right? So if you think about a 5-ton train going 5 miles an hour, they're saying that much energy was destroyed in just connecting the two cars, having the two cars push into each other and connect. You know, with a little locking thing, locks. The two cars are now going together. Are dropping the weight onto the car. So if I just drop a weight onto this 5-ton train, another 5 tons, somehow the amount of joules of energy of a 5-ton train going 5 miles an hour is somehow going to be destroyed, okay, in that process. It's going to end up in the environment. That's a ludicrous proposition. What the truth is a tiny bit of the energy is lost in the transfer. And you can never, ever 100% transfer the momentum, that is the volume of little energy bits something contains, okay? You can't 100% transfer the momentum and heat the environment and make sounds and make sparks and blow things up. You can't do both. You can't let it loose in other directions that can't bring it back again, that have no hope. You can't shoot photons off, okay, and have any hope that the photons are going to bounce off something and land back in your box. If you put the stuff in your box, you can't do other stuff with it. It's in the box. It's not possible to heat and then have the heat go back into momentum in this direction. Heat doesn't do that. Heat doesn't like going where you tell it to go. It likes going where it's going. That's the whole problem with heat. It goes in all the directions, and so you can't use it very effectively. All right, so that's the real point to get to, and so he just uses this stupid jargon to evade again. Okay, so their make-believe magical energy disappeared, but there'll be no evidence of it. They won't show me again the bullet doing 2,000 joules of work in the environment. All right. When they say kinetic energy isn't conserved, that is because the energy that is conserved, why is it because it's energy that is conserved? So it doesn't make, what sense can this possibly, these sentences are so incoherent. When they say kinetic energy isn't conserved, that's because it's energy that is conserved. And again, what do we mean by conservation? Conservation doesn't mean anything in these contexts. I would argue everybody says energy has to be conserved in the universe, so we all agree on that. So this is just about transferred. Okay, so it's how efficiently you transfer. That's why I changed the definition of this elastic thing, because it really is efficient transfers are elastic. Inefficient transfers are inelastic. So when the two clay balls hit each other, right, they're not efficiently transferring their momentum in this direction and that direction. They're transferring it in this direction and that direction into a bunch of motion of the clay molecules. They're not doing anything in they didn't transfer their energy. It got scattered. So again, I could change this into a scatter argument. I could say efficient transfers where the energy is not scattered, okay, are elastic, and transfers where the energy is scattered are inelastic. All right, conserved, that's because it's energy that is conserved. So just more nonsense. Again, we're talking about transfers and whether or not you efficiently or inefficiently transfer the direction. There's a direction. That's the momentum vector. That's the kinetic energy vector in this case. It's a direction. We're measuring energy in a direction. That's what's being measured. And it's clearly, we know if it doesn't go that way, then it went some other way. Those are your only two choices. But you can't have it go this way, be transferred, and go this way, and go that way, and do this, and do that. It can't do both. The energy vector can't be scattered and then re-put back into the bucket. No, it can't spill on the ground and then bounce into your bucket. That's not going to happen. If I'm pouring paint and I spill it on the ground, we have zero expectation that it bounces off the ground and happens to fall in my bucket. That doesn't happen. All right. But it can change from kinetic energy into potential energy. So this has nothing to do with potential energy. And again, potential energy is environmental energy. Okay? Gravity isn't potential energy. Gravity is a constant force, an active force. Okay? And a separate force, frankly. Or heat or chemistry stored energy. So again, just more nonsense about how we magically took this energy and went some magical place. And there's no evidence that the 10-ton train does less work than the 5-ton train. He's asserting that the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour has more energy, twice as much capacity to transfer energy in the environment. Yet we don't have a single experiment collecting the energy. Not one single experiment in the history of the mankind. Not one single piece of experimental evidence. And yet I have to prove something. I have to prove this is gibberish. He doesn't have a single experiment defending this crap, and yet I have to prove it's crap. All right, regarding one, science doesn't say what has more energy except in a specific situation with specific masses. So again, he's whining about these specific masses when they were in the 10-ton, 5-ton example. So, yeah, they're in the example. So, again, these evasions are just so fucking idiotic. I don't see any specific situation or masses. So, this was the 10-ton train argument. I mean, I stated, the 5-ton train has, 5 versus 5 to 10. 10 masses. So, he even clarified it in here, So, it's all clarified. That they're inverse mass to velocity ratio. This is the 8-pound bowling ball one. Clearly masses are in here. So again, what is this bullshit? Just a complete evasion. All right, then Richie says, but if they say kinetic energy isn't conserved, which they say, why do you say it is? So again, the argument is conserved is being used in the wrong way. Because clearly it's about whether it's transferred. The kinetic energy isn't transferred. That's what they're really saying. Okay? Clearly, that's what they're saying. So when the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour is combined with another 5-ton train, and now it's going 5 miles an hour, they're saying, okay, that half the kinetic energy wasn't transferred. Not that it was destroyed. It wasn't transferred. It created heat or vibrations or some other kind of nonsense, and a huge amount of them, frankly. An insane amount of. Just imagine a 5-ton train going 2.5 miles, 5 miles an hour, crashing into something. It's a huge amount of energy. Okay. And why didn't you put something like an asterisk besides your seemingly categorical claim that momentum isn't conserved? Draft will wonder why you didn't mention the only if loophole originally. Well, I wouldn't talk for me, frankly. What I'm wondering at is like the very, again, this language is so broken. It's not about whether energy was conserved. It's about whether you can transfer it twice. Whether you can transfer it to the environment, you can spill it, and yet it's inside your paint bucket. That's the question. All right, IWO. You're seemingly inserting a lot of explanations to rules exceptions to rules and using language in a very plastic way. Yes, well, the rule is, again, their kinetic energy formula fails right on its face just with the gun, right? So we already know they don't believe in Newton's third law. Because Newton's third law says equal and opposite reaction, right? So obviously, if the gun only has 4 joules of action and the bullet has 2,000 joules of action, you've broken Newton's third law, right? There's no Newton's third law that covers kinetic energy, right? I mean, obviously it doesn't apply. Obviously, right? I mean, obviously it doesn't work. There's no equal opposite reaction in the case of a gun. Explain to me how that's not true. So until you say to me the gun's recoil is 2,000 joules, you're stuck with a violation of Newton's third law, aren't you? Okay. Anyway, so Pyrrho says, no, you refuse to learn the system. Blah, 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 blah. Learn how to believe without evidence. You refuse to believe without evidence. What an asshole you are. Science always says, believe me, believe me, believe me. We told you the story and we have badges. Great storyteller badge. I'm a doctor of storytelling. Okay. Has said for a long time, momentum is conserved in elastic collisions. So just more again, as I pointed out, the words elastic and inelastic is mush. A steel ball and a spring are both elastic by their definition. Right? I mean, that's just pretty stupid, right? To think that a steel ball and something as bouncy as a spring are both very elastic. No. Which is good to know since many collisions are pretty elastic. So again, many collisions are actually pretty inelastic. Okay, there's always losses. But anyway, however, no collision we are talking about of regular objects is perfectly elastic. So again, just conceding the point that there's no perfect elastic. But we don't need perfect, frankly. All right, I told you why Ke is not conserved. Because it can change into other types of energy. Yes, it can, but why don't you explain where you measured it? So when I dropped the weight on the car, doubling its mass, why don't you explain to me that that really was half the energy? Half the energy was destroyed and turned into heat and vibrations and all this other nonsense. Because it didn't happen. In the physical reality, it doesn't happen. There's a tiny loss of momentum. It's insignificant, it's so small. Energy overall is conserved. So more blah, 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 baby talk. The energy goes somewhere. Yeah, see, that's the whole point. It can't go both places. So I'll just, JPG guy, maybe if you're going to try again, just do it with the paint analogy. How can I transfer the momentum 100% and move things in the environment? How can I do that? Because it can change into other types of energy overall. So it's just more vague reference to how no, yeah, half the energy was just lost. It, vibrations and sounds and sparks and fires and all that kind of stuff. There's no evidence of any of those things. When the guy drops the weight on the cart, there's no evidence that the track bent and that the table broke and the legs on the table broke and all this crap happened. There's no evidence of it. All right, the energy goes somewhere. Ke turns into heat. So he just keeps saying the same thing over and over again. It turns into potential energy. More nonsense about potential energy. The subject there's no potential energy in these subjects really. Unless you want to talk about the spring's compression, but again, it's just so automatic a function of the spring that why would you even bother with that? As I just said, and it can change from heat back into kinetic energy and back and forth forever. So he just said it can turn into heat and then get into your car. Jump back into the paint bucket. No, it's not going to do that. And that's what the universe is. Blah, blah, blah. Just baby talk. This has been said. What you and he didn't notice to begin with is you prefer to say that you don't understand what wasn't said. Say what you didn't understand wasn't said, whatever that could mean. But it just went over your head. So just more of this baby talk. We have zero evidence. I can cite no sources. I'll just tell you what the truth is, and you should believe it because it came from the pyrrho. Oh, and also it doesn't matter because physics itself has been super clear on what it says about the issue for a long time, so there is no clarity. And the further back in history you go, the sillier and sillier the story goes. Again, the Clay experiments prove kinetic energy wrong. The 1/2 mv squared formula is proven wrong by the Clay experiments that invented kinetic energy. It's so fucking ironic. It's all in the written record, so it's just hilarious. The written record is a farce to the scientific process. It just has all over it. There is no scientist alive anymore, is there? Newton died and all the scientists are now dead because you're not doing anything called science. You're doing propaganda. Okay, its difficulty has been in explaining that to you. Oh yes, you don't have any evidence. That's the difficulty. The difficulty is how do I explain something for which there's zero evidence, and there should be a ton of evidence. I should have a ton of evidence that 5-ton trains going 10 miles an hour have twice as much energy as 10-ton trains going 5 miles an hour. I should have tons of evidence for this. Remember, you could just read it straight from the source instead of wait for videos to interpret it. So read what? And again, how does reading the sources saying the same bullshit over and over again defend in any way the fact that you have zero experimental evidence? Okay, as I told you also, you can see what MV and KE 1/2 and the spring energy. So the spring energy just means that they wrote the spring constant to conform to the notion of kinetic energy. So of course it fits because you wrote it to fit, and all I have to do is rewrite it to not fit. I just take the half off and the squared off, and now it's a momentum formula, and it works just as well. So it's just stupid. You conformed the other formulas to fit your broken one. Duh. And so on. All mean and how they work together. They don't work together at all. The point is it's clearly two different descriptions of the word energy. Momentum and kinetic energy are not compatible theories. They are complete contradictions of each other. In fact, I was going to explain it through unit analysis, so more of that horse shit, and how they are all related mathematically, la 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 la. They're really not related in any way whatsoever, and it's not in any way related to Newton's statement, which was force equals your change in momentum. That's Newton's statement. And how much math relates to physical reality through measuring in space, time, and mass. And you don't have any of those measurements. You don't have any physical experimental evidence. Everything in physics equations is mass, space, and time. Oh, so this is just more baby talk. Oh yeah, we all need to be told that physics is about mass and velocity. No, what we're asking is why would you ever square a velocity? What circumstance is created in the physical universe where squaring a velocity makes sense? Oh, that's right, none. It doesn't make any geometric sense to square a velocity. Squaring a distance makes sense. Squaring other things can make sense, but a velocity? Okay, I can lead a horse to water, but I don't have to care if it drinks. So there's no water here, right? We all understand. There's no physical evidence, not a single experiment. I have shown experiments that indicate the counter argument. I have shown that the block of wood experiment, I changed the mass on this side 4 times, and the stuff going this way is going exactly the same speed. Doesn't matter what's on the other side. Alright, it's not my horse. Yet you don't have any horses, you don't have a stall, you don't have a barn. You just imagine all of this crap, okay, in your little fake. All you have is a bar, okay, Joe's. I've been more than accommodating and generous to this horse. So this more of this bullshit. He hasn't made a coherent argument on the subject of physics ever. And all he's ever done in terms of producing evidence was to produce a complete distortion. And then, on top of that, just to be gratuitously insane, he provides links to cheap, shitty, con artist bullshit where you spend $600 for 2 plastic cars and a photodiode. $600. And he suggests you should go do that. Fuck. What an insane lunatic. All right, I might have called the horse a dumbass a few times on the way to the water. So this is just such a silly story. But it didn't bite me. But it did bite me. So frankly, I didn't bite you. Okay, I merely pointed out facts. Okay, I do think this is a dumbass horse. Yeah, I think you're a piece of garbage, human garbage. Your argument sucks, and I know you're smart enough to know how much it sucks. The fact that you have zero physical evidence, you're smart enough to know that shit, if I'm going to talk like this, I really should have a fucking piece of evidence somewhere. I should be able to produce one shred of fucking physical evidence. You know that's part of the obligation, and yet you're pretending. No, I don't have any such obligation. He has to have evidence. I don't have to have evidence. You're not smart enough to see your double standard here, your duplicitous double standard. I have to prove you wrong. You don't have to prove me wrong. Oh, yeah, that's just great. All right, let it be noted, I still tried to get it to some water. Blah, 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 blah. So all of that crap to evade answering the fucking simple question. What if he doesn't trust the source? So I don't know. Obviously, I don't trust Pyrrho. Yes. He claims the KE formula was poisoned by a religion from the start. The history shows it began with the objective smuggling God back into Newton's godless ideas. Yeah, that's clearly. I mean, I'm just saying. Oh, Leibniz's quote on the subject is pretty clear. All right. There just wasn't. He was clearly objecting to Newton's physics because it didn't fit his metaphysics. It didn't fit his religious notions. He believed in things called monads and solitons. He believed the universe ran on solitons. And he doesn't say soliton because it's like sun. It's soliton because it's like soul. He believed that inanimate matter was alive. Fuck. That's what a monad is. A little living being. Shit. Do you have a link to the specific physics? Now he's bringing up the physics girl video, which really isn't in there anywhere. But whatever. That Gary has so many crazy things claimed. No, it's what started this, because she says something that's crazy. We 100% transferred the momentum, yet we created a bunch of deformation and a bunch of heat and a bunch of other stuff with no momentum. We 100% transferred all the paint to the other bucket, but we spilled half of it on the ground. Yeah, that's fucking idiotic. Yeah. Okay. I predict he misunderstood part and she put things badly. Oh, is that your prediction? No, she said exactly what you're saying. The magical kinetic energy disappeared into a whole bunch of activity in the environment that she has no evidence took place. And you still are stuck with the physical fact that you have to explain how you make something happen, friction or anything. How is there any way I can apply a friction to an object with momentum? And now I'm going to apply a friction, which is the same thing as releasing energy, correct? I mean, everybody would agree that heat would be the same as friction. I think everybody would agree. So give me one example of how something keeps its momentum and creates heat, and creates friction, and creates sound, and creates anything. Show me one example where something makes a sound, but it doesn't cost it any energy. Its momentum stays 100%. Show me anything deforming something, misshaping it, where it doesn't have to slow down to do it. Show me anything, what's the other thing they're saying? Deform, sound, heat. That heats anything without losing momentum. Show me any physical moving object that actually heats something and doesn't lose any momentum. So yeah, it's a ludicrous statement, okay, that you can create frictional losses and keep your momentum. It's idiotic. All right, then he says, Pyrrho again. You could be trolling or really confused. I can't tell. Well done. So there's no comment here that indicates that. But anyway, first you have to learn math. So he's talking to the Richie guy. And so he's just starting to insult him now. That the language of the formula, and we're not talking strange stuff. Yeah, you're talking completely unevidenced religion. That's all it ever was. It started as an overt religion, okay, monads and solitons. Then it was redug up by the silly French lady, okay, and she used her money to propagandize on the subject, and they used clay experiments to validate the mv squared. So there's no half in front of it. Mv squared was validated by clay experiments. And then in the 1800s, they snuck the half in front of it, which devaluated the original experiments that proved it. So the original experiments that proved it are now disproven by putting the half in front of it. Yeah, that's the history. It's crap. Okay, you are talking strange stuff to somebody who's rational and reasonable. To a reasonable observer, this is strange that you're defending this horrible history, this unevidenced theory that just makes a mess of Newton's really good physics. Just multiplying, dividing, and adding. We're just taking multiplying, adding, and division with variables. So again, we already know if you believe in momentum, mv, you already understand, multiplication. You understand volume. Okay, what you don't understand is, why should I multiply the volume, the velocity portion of the volume times itself? Why should I do that? That would be stupid. Okay, then you will be able to see directly what the equations say. So the equations are all circular. They're all written to defend each other. Okay, there's no real equation anywhere. This is not Newton's physics. It's not a derivative of Newton's physics. Newton's physics was F equals momentum. It really was. Change in momentum over change in time. Well, what is change? When you change anything over time, what are you changing? Oh yeah, the original thing. The time is irrelevant, right? Doesn't mean anything. The stuff is the momentum. So the force is clearly the momentum. The force isn't time. All right. Everything else is narrative and interpretation. So no, everything else is evidence in an argument. 90% of the argument should be what the evidence indicates, and you don't have any evidence. The relationship between the measurements of distance, space, time, mass, and used in the math with multiplications and divisions. That's right, considering every force as if it was gravity. And all these interactions have nothing to do with directly gravity. They're not gravitational equations. A train hitting another train is not a gravity equation. Okay, what does it mean that the mass is multiplied by the velocity? Well, that means a lot. It makes real sense. Okay, the mass is the carrier of the velocity. So that makes really good sense. What doesn't make any sense is squaring the velocity. What does it mean if you multiply the force by time that the force is active? So again, more nonsense about how any of these collisions have anything to do with the time the force is active. They're almost instantaneous transfers. The transfer in steel is at the speed of sound in steel. The force is moving through the steel. As you could just watch it moving like sound. It's a vibration moving right through the steel. Okay, whatever that means. And if the steel doesn't move, if it can't move all the mass, then it's going to reflect. And that's the simple principle. Whatever they mean is the same thing, because these two formulas always give the same number. So this is just too idiotic. They don't give the same number. That's the whole point. I can use the momentum number, okay, for a dime going 1,000 miles an hour and 2 kilograms going 1 mile an hour, and I'll get exactly the same number for the momentum, and I get completely different numbers for mv squared. No matches. Well, there's always one match, but all the rest don't match. It's just such a liar. Let's see. What's this beautiful? Okay, I don't know where was I? I don't remember the beautiful part. Same thing, because the formula always gives the same number. Okay, no they don't. Energy multiplies the force by the distance. So more of this crap, force times distance. What distance doesn't have anything to do with how much energy something has. So again, just more complete nonsense. Distance just has to do with how fast you're going. It doesn't have to do with how much, again, so it's just a completely, intuitively you can know, it can't mean that. That would mean velocity is everything and mass is nothing. At least mass is half the equation. You know, I mean, it's too stupid. Instead, what does that mean? It doesn't mean a damn thing is what it means. Force doesn't have anything to do with just being distance. How far something travels will not tell you how much energy it has. And that's true in gravity, for example. 4 times the height to get twice the velocity. You don't have 4 times the energy. Okay, well, it means that regardless of the mass, you are going to push the thing until it gets to the destination where pushing stops. So again, this just ignores all the facts that, you know, velocity breaks down speed. All I have to do is do the cornstarch experiment, and then I can prove all of your physics wrong. And we can do Vm squared. So the whole universe changes if we just use a different thing to test, because then it's not going to matter. Speed isn't going to help you any. All right, applying a force for a given time imparts momentum, la 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 la. Again, this has nothing to do with transfers. Applying a force for a given distance provides energy, more la 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 la. Absolute bullshit, has nothing to do with transfers. I can see it has nothing to do with impulse. It has nothing to do with things that are carrying velocity. They're carrying it. You know, no matter where it's direct, they're carrying it. It's a thing they have. It's not a force raining. Okay, it's already fluid in their bucket, so it's an amount in the bucket. It's not a raining force. I mean, really, you have to get this, you know, infantile almost. This is so stupid. I can see, like, it seems that those two things couldn't both be true, but that's why some people say it's beautiful. Okay, so, you know, right there, you just almost, ew, that's disgusting. How things like this in physics work together. They don't work together. That's the whole point. Your physics doesn't work. Okay, and help you to solve complicated problems like optics bouncing into each other. So again, he's getting objects bouncing into each other, and and how you don't get the right answer. If I don't use a ping pong ball in the billiard example, if I take the air out of the ping pong ball, the experiment doesn't work. The formula doesn't predict the outcome. Why does it need to have air in it? Yeah, okay. How much energy and momentum will be transferred and the resulting velocity. So again, just more bullshit. I'm pointing out how that creates insane paradoxes, and they're ignoring the paradoxes. Okay, so Richie, I've suggested that he tag videos where physics girl and the professors make seemingly contradictory claims. Well, I'll wait till Bro, creates his great experiment, and then I'll put together Bro's claim, and I'll point out how he's not arguing with me, he is arguing with Professor Lewin. Also, he has been banging the drum on the subject of the actual history of the KE formula, so I'm asking you to comment on that history. Was smuggling God back into Newtonian godless ideas the real objective? Well, clearly it was Leibniz's objective, and clearly Leibniz lost decisively. He died a nobody, okay, and Newton died God. I mean, Newton was the most celebrated. I mean, he's buried, right in the middle of the, Buckingham Palace or whatever the fuck it is. There's no denying that Newton's ideas were threatening to the religious establishment of the day. Was the pushback perhaps the birth of scientific creationism? And the pushback was rich people in France decided to rename physics religion. They wanted the crystal universe. They wanted a universe that was more interesting, clearly, than that was more human-centric. All right, so then Stephen Bro links to the Physics Girl video at a time code, which I'm like, okay, what the fuck? So let's play this.
That collide deform, and they don't elastically return to their original state. So, done with inelastic. Let's move on to talking about elastic collisions. A lot of times, colliding objects do keep their shape, or at least they return to it after a little bit of jiggling. In these cases, very little to no energy is lost in the collision. We call these elastic collisions. Although most collisions, even the ones that you talk about in your physics class as being elastic, are not perfectly elastic.
Right. So again, it's just about, and again, the whole point is what you're really measuring by the words elastic and inelastic is how efficiently you transferred the energy. That's it. Did this vector stay going this way? If it doesn't stay going this way, it's inelastic. If it stays going this way, it's elastic. So it's just about essentially a scatter argument. If you scatter the energy, inelastic. If you don't scatter the energy and you keep it moving in the same direction you're moving, elastic.
Think about that water balloon that didn't break. You can see it wobbling, so some energy was lost to deformation or to heat.
All right, so this isn't the train analogy. So this is, so he links to after the train part. So that's his time code, right? Is after the train analogy. Let me see. Yeah. So he links to after the train analogy. So the very subject that she's discussing the trains, that's the part he links to is after that. So let's just go through this real quick. So here she's doing the formula. She concedes that when the two trains are combined, it's twice the mass, it's half the velocity. Okay, clearly states it.
And that.
Okay, and then we're going to get the joule numbers, and then we'll see the contradiction in the joule numbers. Okay, and that's when she does this deformation nonsense. Okay, so yeah, we'll just play this a little bit.
That equals 72 joules. So we lost kinetic energy.
No, we lost half the energy, right? So again, she says something like, we lost some kinetic energy. No, you lost exactly half. The kinetic energy is gone, okay? And where did it go? She's saying it went into a fire that was created when the two cars hit each other. New York City fell off the continent because there were so many vibrations in the track or some other kind of horse shit that an insane number of joules went absolutely everywhere and all over the place. When no, those collisions don't have any of that crap happening, and that's not the truth at all. And the simple truth is that the momentum was successfully transferred in an elastic way. Okay, it maintained its directional vector, and all you really did was add more bread, and now you had to spread your jelly thinner. But none of the jelly went on the walls, and none of it went on the ceiling. You just respread the jelly on a bigger piece of bread. So instead of so what happened? So he actually
happened to the energy.
I mean, it's just so just more of his deception. He actually time codes the video past the part that I played. The clip I played is all this. I didn't play the rest of her video. I played this part.
Well, in an inelastic collision, when the colliding objects stick, some of the original kinetic energy is...
So she said again, some of the energy. No, half the energy. Half the energy of a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour disappears.
Lost. Some of it escapes as heat. Oftentimes it goes into the object's mechanical deformation.
So this is the example she's using. A completely inelastic collision. Completely inelastic almost, right? I mean, this is about as inelastic as you can goddamn get. I mean, you're watching the energy scatter right before your eyes, watching it fly off in other directions. It is not successfully transferring the vector. The vector of the thing was this way. Now the vector is gone. It's doing this, okay? And again, the momentum, what is causing all this crap to move? The momentum. Is it possible for me to allow that ball to go right through that apple, create all that deformation, and not slow down? Doesn't the little white ball have to slow down if it makes all this deformation? So if it makes thousands of joules of deformation, doesn't the little white ball have Have to. No exceptions, no way around it. It has to lose its momentum, right? It can't possibly make the apple go when it just eviscerated it. I mean, it's just so stupid.
You throw an egg against the wall and it deforms.
So she just said how we completely transferred 100% of the momentum. We can't 100% transfer the momentum to the apple and make all of these bits of apple go in all these other directions. Can't happen in the physical reality. It's ludicrous baby talk mush shit. It's not physics. It's nonsense.
Or a ping pong ball hits some fruit and it deforms. The energy isn't lost to the universe, but it is no longer in the system of the two things.
Right, and therefore the momentum isn't in the system anymore either. Where's the momentum go? Oh, that's right, the ping pong ball isn't going anywhere. That vector is gone. The apple isn't going anywhere. That vector's gone. So obviously the momentum is gone. You didn't 100% transfer the momentum. So show me you 100% transferring the momentum. That is, either the ping pong ball goes straight through the apple and keeps going at the same speed, or you transferred it, and that means the apple is now going at half the speed, or whatever the correct ratio is for its mass equivalence. Okay, show me you conserving the momentum and making that mess. Show me you conserving the momentum and splattering the apple on the wall. Show me you doing that anywhere in the universe. Because that's what you're saying, and it's retarded. It's so goddamn stupid.
That collided, so we can't easily measure it. So
La. You know, we can't measure it. It's like dark energy. It's like dark matter. We made dark matter. There. That's where the energy went. We made dark matter with it. Now it'll be even harder for us to find it.
You have a collision where things stick together afterwards. You can't use conservation of energy to solve those problems. And that's where
Right, so they use conservation of momentum, and yet they don't conserve the momentum because you can't do both things. You can't deform the train and keep your momentum. You can't bend the metal and keep your momentum.
The word inelastic comes from. The objects that collide deform, and they don't elastically return to their original state. So no
evidence that any of that happened in her experiment. No evidence of it. Nothing. And it clearly can't happen if you transfer the momentum. So it's just too stupid. It's crappy physics. It might as well be Ken Wheeler, on a Slim Fast. This is just crap physics. It's just gimmicks and chicanery and bullshit and pompous and arrogant and pretentious. Her whole fake little set, the whole fake little bullshit is terrible. And the fact that you people think this has anything to do with being science focused or giving a shit about the truth. You clearly don't give a shit about the truth because you'll fucking embrace and endorse this horse shit. 1.9 million subscribers. 2.4K. Oh, thumbs up. Okay. So 42,000 views for this piece of shit. And what are 23 people have finally figured out it's garbage physics. Ugh. But just an example of Stephen Bro I didn't think he was this much of a fucking... it's just such a fucking... Why the fuck would he time code it to after the part of the clip I played? I never played the part he time coded to. This is the part of the video. Pyrrho asked the question, where's this video that made him so pissed off? It wasn't the part after this. No, it was the part this. This is the part. Oh, what a lying sack of shit to do that. Oh man, he's just such a despicable human being. Look at all these little extra links. Oh, this ought to be fun. Alright, well maybe I'll save that for another video. Let's just see what it starts with. In addition to providing you with the link you keep requesting and no one seems to ever provide. So I've played the clip 20 times now in my videos, probably 20 times. I wrote a reply which is rather too long, so I won't let me post. I may break it down into 2 posts. It's just amazing. This is fucktard. Or just spare you all that reading. There were some good links, though. What the hell is he talking about? So another time code. to what? The same video? Further along? Okay, so let's just...
From the very first touch, Pampers, the #1 pediatrician recommended brand.
Deform and they don't elastically return to their original.
The same one. Okay, so he just sends us to the same fucking clip again? What a fucking idiot. I should have noticed it was the same. It's the same link. What a fucking idiot. Okay, that is Physics Girl video on elastic collisions. The one Gary tore apart like a clueless idiot. So again, it's exactly after the part I tore apart. He links to the part that I never played. What a fucking idiot. What a fucking idiot. Alright, so anyway. So what's this one? This is Gary's first response. Right, so you'll see me playing the fucking clip. Let's see if he time-coded this. No.
Yeah, another draft physics video presentation. Hopefully a shortish video, just on a couple of little subjects.
Alright, so let's
I was watching a
jump through it. Okay.
You can't lower the kinetic
Okay,
energy.
well let me go back.
Just,
I was watching a Physics Girl video.
just didn't make any sense, and then I thought about it, and it's an obvious, mathematical mistake. So I mean, these videos, she produces them. They're not just thrown together. They're not just they just don't happen. They're scripted, all this crap, and it's such a basic conceptual mistake. I just thought I would.
Right, and the conceptual mistake I'm pointing out is you can't 100% pour the paint, the momentum, into a bucket and give the momentum to a bunch of other things like heat and deformation and all that stuff. You can't use the momentum to change the environment and use the momentum to transfer it. You can't do both things. It's impossible. I can't spill the paint and then expect the paint to jump into the bucket. That can't happen. That's the argument. And this idiot thinks this somehow is going to show how I'm wrong. I'm wrong to think you have to degrade momentum to deform objects. You have to degrade momentum to heat something. You have to degrade momentum to make sound. I'm crazy because I say it's impossible to make any kind of environmental impact without using something's momentum. Something with momentum had to give it movement. It can't get it without taking it from something else's momentum. An asteroid hitting the Earth, the momentum of the asteroid affects the Earth's momentum. There's nothing else involved. People are fucking idiots. So we'll see. I mean, the fact that Stephen Bro is obsessing about all this other crap is a clear indication that his experiment must not be exactly what he's promising it. If he had this golden piece of perfect evidence, why doesn't he just get to that? Why is he bothering with all this arguing and talking and texting? Why doesn't he just get to his one proof? You got to wonder. It doesn't make much fucking sense. And he's had this proof for a fucking month now. Alright, anyway. Enough of a video. Alright, so all I can do is reason with you people. I should just go through the history again, right? Because the history is so important to understanding just how bad this is. Anyway. So, this has been a Draft Physics video presentation. Please, use your brains in a rational manner. Recognize that these people are just pretentious douchebags. They really don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't understand the universe mechanically at all. They've just been given these little speeches to regurgitate like Bible verses. These are little Bible verses. They don't have any understanding of reality.